Hi guys, so in this video I'm going to show you how to build a contact form using the Elementor form builder. The contact form, adding contact forms on your website just allows your visitors a simple way to get in touch with you, either to inquire about a product or a service that you're offering, or even just to get in touch for any queries and things like that. Elementor's form builder allows you to build a form, fully customizable form with your own styling in a really easy way. They offer different form field options and also the styling options, and also integrate with things like MailChimp to add subscribers to a newsletter, email marketing service, or user information to a CRM. So what you want to do first is open the page that you want to add the form to in Elementor. And what you want to do is add the form widget. So we'll just search form. We'll just click and drag that in. And you have the form default settings all there. So it comes with a name, email, message in the beginning, and then a simple submit button. If we go on the left here and then click on form fields, you can see under type, there's loads of different form field types that you can use to add to your form and collect all the information that you need. A good form is really clear and really easy for users to navigate and understand what is the information they're meant to be putting in, and it also collects all the necessary information that you need to get in contact with them and to answer any of the queries that they have. So with this widget, you have the form fields, you have options to do with the form fields, submit button, actions after submit, and additional options. You also have styling options for the fields, you have styling options for the forms, the buttons, and any of the messages. And then under advanced, you have the usual sort of margin and padding options for the form as a whole, as well as any motion effects, custom CSS that you want to add. But coming back to the content, you can see you can use the form builder here to kind of sort out exactly what form fields you have. You can also click and drag and drop all of these form fields to move them in the order that you want. You also have the option to copy and paste existing forms. If you know that you want two different text fields, you can just copy an existing one and then just change the content. So under the form fields, you can add and manage each of the form fields that will be included in the form. So the first thing you want to do is give the form a name. So make it sort of meaningful to what the form is. So if it's a form on the contact page, you would call it contact form. Then you have the form fields, which is a list of fields in your form, and you can duplicate, add, or delete fields, and if you need to drag them in any order, you can. Within each field, you'll see it's separated into type, label, placeholder, required, and for some of them they have a column width. So under type is the type of field that you want, and you can see Elementor offer all of these different types of fields. Then you have the label, which is the name of the field, so and it's what gets displayed on the form and on the email you receive from the user. Under placeholder is just the front end name display of the field, so you can put in an example of what you expect users to fill in under the placeholder part. Then you have the required, so if you switch a field to required, it just means the form won't be able to submit unless they put a value inside that required field. And then you have a column width, and this lets you set the width of the field. If you want a form with 2 fields in one row, set each field to 50%. Or if you want a form with 3 fields in one row, set each field to 33%. So with the text field, this is a simple text field, so things like name, first name, last name, things like that. And then under the email field, this is just an email type and includes a validation for email as well. Then you have a text area. So this is like the text field, but except a little bit bigger. And this would be more for if you want users to add like additional information and really type out more of a paragraph. And you can, under rows, it lets you decide how big you want the text area to be. So by default it's 4, but if you change it to 5, you can see it gets a bit bigger. If you want it a bit smaller, you can change it to 2, things like that. The URL field is just a website URL field if you want people to paste in a link to a profile or something like that. Then you have the telephone field, which is used for telephone numbers. And you have a radio option. So the radio option is sort of like a single choice, so you can give users an option to select from, and by using the radio one, it means that they choose only one option. And with the radio one, you can see the options you will fill in each here and enter each option in a separate line. And then with the inline list, it just means instead of it listing in one column, it'll list in as a row. So for example, if I do option 1, and then on new line option 2, you can see it sort of stacks one after the other, but if I do inline list, it goes in a list form. Select is similar to radio, except instead of everything being listed, it is formed as a drop-down instead. So instead, all of them get put in a drop-down, and I can just select from the drop-down. This saves a lot of space, especially if you have a lot of options. You can just use a simple drop-down. And then the checkbox. So this is similar to radio fields, except with radio fields you can only select one, but if you want people to have the option to select more than one, you would click the checkbox, and that gives people the option to select more than one. Acceptance. So this adds sort of a terms checkbox for the user to accept. So I accept the terms and conditions. And then you can select check by default if you want, but it gives users that option that they have to select that. Then you have the number field, and this is just a number type if you want people to enter sort of a number. And you can give it sort of minimum field and a maximum value as well. And the date field, and so if you want people to enter their date of birth or things like that, you can just add in a date field. And again, you can set a minimum date, so they can't add a date before the 18th and a maximum date. If you want to add a date for like when is a suitable option for you to call them back or to get in touch, you can use that as a date field. Same with time, you can add like a time field as well. File upload, so this is good if you want people to upload maybe a job application or a CV or things like that. You can add a file upload field, and with that you can select a maximum file size, so you can give it a file size so that you don't need to download huge attachments or anything like that. You can give it a maximum file size. You can also give it an allowed file types as well. So if you only want to accept JPEGs, or if you only want to accept PDFs and not docx, you would just type in PDF or docx, and that way it would only accept those two file types. And if you leave it blank, it'll accept all file types. And then you can give it an option if you want to select multiple. If you want them to be able to add multiple files, you would just slide that to yes, and then you can set a max number of files as well. Password is just a simple password field for them to add. HTML just adds an HTML field. And then hidden, it adds a hidden field to the user, but it's hidden to the user, but it's visible to the admin. Then you have reCAPTCHA version 3 and version 2 as well. To use reCAPTCHA, you need to add the API key, and then when you add the API key, you would then just need to add that in the Elementor settings. And then honeypot. So honeypot adds a honeypot to your form, and it's basically a hidden field, and it's designed for spam bots that are filling out fields or that are filling out forms. So humans won't see the field, so they won't fill it out, but because a bot can't tell the difference that the field is hidden, it will fill it out. So if a honeypot field is not empty whenever it's submitted, the form is obviously filled out by a robot, and it'll automatically be rejected. So that's all the forms. So let's start off with building a simple sort of form here. So we'll start off with name, and instead of just having it slightly unclear was just name. We'll separate it into first name and last name. So we'll add a simple text field and we'll change the label to first name. And under placeholder, I'll just write an example of a first name that we'll expect to see, and we'll set that to required. And because I want the first name and the last name to sit on one line, I'm going to set the first name field to be 50%, and then I'm going to copy that so I can get the second one as well. And then I'm going to change that to last name. I'm also going to change the placeholder to an example last name. Next thing you want to add is things like a contact information. So if a way to contact them either by email or by telephone. So if I add item and I will just select that as telephone, the label will be contact number. And as a placeholder, I'll just add and then we'll set that to required. And again, I want the contact number and the email field to be on one line, so I'll set them both to 50%. And then I'll add a new one, and I'll change this to email. And I'll add the email label. And under a placeholder, I'll add an example of what I want the user to fill out. And we'll set that to required and change the column width to 50%. Another thing I might want to do is add the reasons for contact. So like a bit more information about why people are contacting you. So if we were to select radio, for example, and we'll change that to how can we help? I will then put in the options of what we can help out with. So for example, customer service, or inquire about that product. And just as a backup, I'll put other. And you can see as a radio option, it's being listed as a column, sort of stacked one after the other. And if I clicked inline list, it would do it as one long line. So set this to 100. Just set like that. Or I can change it to a select, and this is just one long drop down, and it makes it a bit neater because it's not taking up a lot of space. And if you wanted people to be able to select more than one, you would change that to a checkbox and have them select off which option it is. In this example, we'll just keep it to a select. And if you wanted people to expand a little bit, what we can do is add a text area and call it additional information. In case they want to add more information about why they're calling or why they're getting in contact with you. And for this one, we won't keep it required, as sometimes they might not have any additional information. It might just be, we'll just make this one an option. Another thing you can do is something called step. And what that is if you were to have a big contact form, so name information, and then a separate page for file uploads and things like that, it separates it out into different steps so that users aren't overwhelmed with all of the things that they need to fill out, and they can just take it in little by little. So if we were to add a step for contact information and another step for reasons why you're inquiring, we can separate those two out. So when I added a new field and I selected step, it added an item 1 above the first name, and this is the first step, and then it added the second item, and when this is the second step. But I can go in and add as many steps as I need to. So if I add another one, that's 3 steps, and then I can add fields between each of these, so then I can separate out what each step is for. In this example, we'll just keep to 2 steps. So in the first step, I will write as a label contact information. And you can give it an icon if you want. And the second step, I will move that up to here, so that the first step is just the contact information, and then the second step can be a reason for inquiry. And you can see now it's separated into contact information and reason for inquiry. If I wanted to move to the next page, I would need to fill out the form. And when I click next, it switches to the next page, which is the second step of reasons for inquiry, and it's the fields that I wanted in that one. And you can see they can also go previous back to the last step. So it's up to you how you want to do that. Next, if we scroll down, you can see we have options for input size. So these are just the sizes of the fields. It's set to small, but we can change it to medium or extra small. For this one, we'll just change it to small. You don't want to have anything too small, otherwise on mobile people won't be able to click on the fields correctly. And then you have the option to show or hide the label. And then you also have the option to show or hide the required mark. And we'll just keep it on for now, so it gives people an indication of what they need to have in order to submit the form. Then you have the options for the buttons, and the button right now is set to small, and we can change that here. We also have the option to change it medium, small, large. In the style tab, you have the option to change the padding as well. Then you have the alignment. So right now it's set to justified, so that it's taking up the full width, but we can change it to center, so it's not taking up the full width, or up to the right or to the left. We'll just keep it centered for now. Step buttons, so you can change the name of them. If you want to change it to say next step, previous step, you can. And then you have the submit button. So the submit button currently says send, but we can change that to submit. And you can see it says submit now. You can also give it an icon as well. Then you have the actions of after submit. So these are literally actions that will be performed after a visitor submits the form successfully, basically. So this can either send an email to the user, it can send an email to yourself, it can connect to a third party like MailChimp, or redirect to a thank you page and things like that. So by default, the ones selected are collect submissions and email. So by collect submissions, it just means it'll save the submissions on the back end of the website. So you have a copy of it always on the back end of the website. To look for the email submissions, what you would do is go onto the dashboard. And then under Elementor tab, you want to click on submissions. And all the form submissions will show up here. The name, form, what page it was on, submission date, and things like that. Next thing option you have is the email, and this is the email as in like once this form is submitted, create an email. And you have two email options. You have email 1 and email 2. So the first email can go to yourself, and it'll be like a notification that someone has submitted a form, and it can contain all of the form entries. So if we click on the email tab, we have the options here. So the email will go to admin email of your choice. So this is basically the notification email that someone submitted a form. And you can give it a subject, so new message from the website. And then you have the message, which by default the shortcode is all fields. So it'll just paste all fields that have been submitted as part of the message. But what you can do is sort of personalize a little bit. So form details below. And then it'll detail the form. To customize sort of the fields that are sent, what you can do is just paste the form shortcode. So if you go back into form fields and select one of the fields, so for example, first name, if you go into advanced, you can see a shortcode is being given. So if we copy that and then go back into email, form, we can customize a little bit. So form details below by field name, and it will then just say form details below by, and then it will it'll paste in the name of the form that they'd submitted. And then what you do is you give it a from name, So this is the email that the email is being sent from, and a from name as well, so an email and a name. And then you have a reply to. So when you receive the email and you hit reply, you can change that to be the email field. So whatever they supply in the email field, it'll reply directly to that. So you don't need to come in and check what the email is. You can just immediately reply from the email app that you have. And then you can choose if you want to CC or BCC in an email in any of the replies. You can also choose to send any metadata. So in terms of if you want to choose to send the date and time the form was submitted, or the page URL it's from, you might not need the user agent credit or remote IP. In fact, you can just have the date, time, page URL, or you can have none of that metadata shown at all. And then the send as, you can either send the email either as HTML or just as a plain email. So that's the first email done. And email 2 is very useful. For example, it can be used as a confirmation received by your site's visitor immediately after he sent a form on your site. So basically, when someone submits a form, that person will then get an email saying your form has been successfully submitted. We will contact you very soon. And just lets people know that their email was received and that you guys will get back to them. So this email will actually go to the person who submitted the email. So it'll be whoever submits whatever they put in the email field here. So what you want to do is go into form fields, go into email, and then in advanced, you just want to take the form shortcode. And then you just want to go back into email 2. And then you just want to click paste in the form shortcode here. And then subject can be your inquiry was successfully sent. And then in the message, you can personalize this a little bit to what they've submitted. So for example, hi, and then we'll take their first name. And go back into email 2. So hi, first name. Thanks for your inquiry. We will get back to you soon. And this just makes it a bit more personable and just kind of reassures the user that they did receive the form and the query will get answered soon. And the from email, you want to just change that to the official email, maybe that's on your website, and things like that. And the from name, it can be the name of your website. And the reply to, if you want people to be able to reply to the email, that you can put in your actual email, or you can just do no reply at whatever the domain name is. And you can choose if you want to CC or BCC someone in that, you can. And then also with them, you can select some metadata, but again, this might not be important for the user. Next thing then is the step settings. So this obviously will show up if you have steps incorporated into your form, and it kind of just helps you decide how you want the steps to look like. So by default, it's number and text. We can change that to just be text or icon or a number, or icon and text and things like that. In this case, we'll just stick with number and text. And you can also choose the shape as well. You want to do square or rounded, or you don't want a shape at all. And lastly, additional options. So with additional options, you have the option of making custom messages. So when the form is successfully submitted, by default, it just says the form was sent successfully. You can change that to be a bit more personable. So thanks for submitting. We will get back to you soon. Same with an error message. You can say an error has occurred, and you can give them a phone number in case they aren't able to submit. You can say an error has occurred. Please call us on this number. And then the required message. So if someone were to submit a form without entering required fields, they will just say this field is required. or something's gone wrong. This is just the default error message that shows. So once you're happy with the structure of the form, what's on it, and the field settings and the functionality of it, we can move on to styling. So if we go into Style tab, you can see we have different options. We have the form settings, the field settings, buttons, messages, and the steps. So if we go into forms, you can see we can set a gap between each column. So if we drag the slider, you can see we can give it a bit more of a gap. Same with the row, so that's the space between each row of the field. So we can drag that and give it a bit more space or less space. Then you have the label spacing. This is the space between the label and the actual field. So if we increase that a little bit and just give it a bit more space. Then you have the label text color. We could change that to something a bit darker so it's easier to see. You can also change the typography as well. Then if you move on to fields, these are the actual individual fields that you have. And we can change the text color, and we'll change it to a little bit darker. It's easy to see. And if we type in something, you can see the field is now the dark color. And you can give it a stronger border as well. By default, it's 1, but you can change it to something a bit thicker. And you can give it a border radius as well. Next thing with the buttons, so you have options for the next and submit button and also the previous button. If we would change, and we have the 2 states as well, we can do a normal state button colors and the hover state button colors. So in the hover state, if we change the background color to the green with opacity and then change the color to black, and just give it a bit more animation there. And we'll do the same with the previous. You can see all the buttons being working there. And you can choose to give it a border radius, and if you want to give it an animation as well. And you can also give typography settings or color settings for the success, error, and inline messages, just like you would any of the form fields. And lastly, the steps. So this is this section up here. If you want to change the spacing between the steps and the form, you can. If you want to add a bit more padding around the numbers as well. You can also give it a color. So when it's inactive, active, and completed. So for example, if it's active, we can change that to the black color. And if it's completed, it'll stay green. And if it's not active, we can change to the gray. And then you can give it a width as well, the actual divider. And you can change the gap if you want to add a bit more gap or less gap. But once you're happy with everything, and if you want to give it some additional margin padding around the site, the actual contact form itself, you can, just in the advanced section. But once you're done with everything and you're happy enough with the functionality and the styling, all you do is just click update. And that's the form set up here. And you can see the form with the 2 steps. And if I were to submit here, inquire about a product or service, and if I click submit, thanks for submitting, we will get back to you soon. And now if I check the submissions page on Elementor, you can see I have my first submission with the contact form, the page, and if I click into it, I can see exactly what's being sent in terms of contact information and the reasons for inquiry and things like that.